Welcome to Aim in Practice, where we talk about life as a practitioner, wellness in general, and what it means to practice. I'm your host, Jess Reynolds, and today I talk with Kay. Now, Kay is an acupuncturist from Eastern Canada. What's interesting about her story is she's in a very small region with a ton of acupuncturists, a small town that's very close to a city that has an acupuncture college, which means there could be a lot of competition, but due to her unique mindset and how she approaches her practice, that's actually not the case. So we talk about life as a practitioner in an area where there's seemingly a lot of competition and how to differentiate yourself. We also talk a lot about somatic experiencing, as that's her next step in her professional career. So this is a really beautiful conversation with an amazingly beautiful human, and I'm grateful I had the chance to talk with Kay. So enjoy. And Kate, welcome back. And I say welcome back for those of you that are listening or watching, because we actually had this conversation for the first time 4 or 5 days ago or something like that, but technical difficulties, and there was no audio or unusable audio. So thank you for joining me again. I really appreciate you taking the time to have our second conversation, and I'm really looking forward to it.
As am I. It will be nice to have a continuation on the already great conversation we had.
Awesome. Well, let's begin where we did last time and just start with a little introduction about yourself, and just tell me a bit more about what got you interested in acupuncture and what you do.
Sure. So I always knew in life that I wanted to be in a helping field, but I wasn't sure where that was going to land. So I grew up in Calgary, and about 7, almost 8 years ago now, I moved to Nova Scotia and was just kind of, exploring the world still, not quite sure what I was doing with life, what I wanted to do with career. And I kind of landed at this point where the jobs that I was having or experiencing when I first arrived here were not settling well, to the point of having dreams of setting my house on fire. It was time to choose something that was going to be concrete and grounding in the reason why I moved here.
Totally.
So I Googled natural healing schools in Nova Scotia, because I thought, I didn't think that nursing or Western medicine was going to be the right fit for me. And when I Googled it, there was an acupuncture school in Bedford that was the first one to pop up. Bedford's just out of Halifax, for those who don't know. And
okay.
It was really as simple as going for a tour, applying the next week, starting 4 or 5 weeks later, and falling in love. I had never experienced acupuncture before or knew anything of what it was about. And it was an easy fit.
I love how common that part of the story is. Like, how many people, and maybe one day I'll do a survey, but the number of people who are like, I don't know, I just went and checked a school out, and next week I started. It's like a staggeringly high number of people. It's maybe not a whim. I wouldn't say it's like people do it on a whim, but I think actually that's probably the best word, though. It's like, yeah, sure, why not spend the next 3 to 6 years of my life in school, or 2 if you're doing massage, right? Like it's cool how so many paths lead people to the same point. And it's like, once you get into school, there's this deep party that's like, yes, I know, this is where I'm supposed to be, right?
Exactly. And it was so quick and I find it's either that path of the showing up and like 3 weeks later I was in school and all worked out, or those who have experienced the healing themselves and want to give back with that after that. Because I think that would be those would be the 2 lanes that kind of came in my class, at least.
Yeah, it was the same in mine. And I mean, I share nothing in common with the lane of people who's like, acupuncture played such a huge role in my life, and that's why I'm into it. I mean, my history is I literally just fell into it. If you had have asked me 3 months before I went to acupuncture school if I'd be in acupuncture school, I'd be like, Acu who now? Well, maybe not 3 months, but within the year, I'd be like, absolutely not. Like earlier that year, within 12 months, I was in the fire department. Like, it's not something I'm going to be doing.
So I don't relate to that story at all, but you're right. It's like those are the two stories, the type of people who are just like, I'm going where life may take me. And suddenly, poof, I'm in acupuncture school. And then
Right.
the people who's like, I've been suffering for like my whole life. And it's
Yeah.
acupuncture that saved me. And now I want to dedicate my life to it. And yeah, just interesting how those are the common stories.
Yeah. And it was, I think, definitely the language that I was introduced to in the first couple weeks that really, it was like speaking a language I didn't know I knew, and it just really settled in the fact that you could approach healing the body with a poetic sense and a felt sense and an intuitive side, because that just felt so different from any kind of medical experience I had had growing up. That kind of felt cold and rushed and separate.
Yeah. I like how you say language. And I'm curious, like, do you mean the literal language, like the verbiage we use in Chinese medicine? Or do you mean like, when you're talking to somebody and you're like, you're talking my language, like a love language thing, like when somebody just vibes the way you vibe and it feels like you're speaking the same language, even though you're both speaking, you know what I mean? Like, what kind of language do you mean when you say you went to acupuncture school?
I think it's a combination of both. I really enjoyed the poetry and the imagery of the five elements and the relationships. I had a fabulous kind of foundations teacher who told it in the form of like stories, and so they really stuck with me in the fact that we could do healing through stories. Like, I will never not think of an overacting of the co-cycle, or when wood overacts on earth. I hear that in my mind as his voice going, bad daddy, he's overacting. And so that these like little familial relationship nature descriptors just made so much sense, because that's what we live every day. So of course that would play into our health and the way our bodies work.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and what's projected.
Yeah, I like that part about it too. That there are stories behind it, and sometimes the stories are definitive and explicitly told. Like, each organ has a character that's related to some sort of position, either in the military or in royalty, right? So there's like the literal allegories and stories and metaphors, but then there's so much sort of nested into the deeper principles of Chinese medicine that I think speaks to those deep parts of an individual. Like when you talk to somebody about lateral epicondylitis, that's understandable. It makes sense. You can work through the mechanics, and that's good, and it's helpful and super useful. But then there comes a time and a place where it's like we actually need to speak to some sort of deeper part of the soul of an experience. And I think TCM has a lot to do with that, yeah?
Absolutely. And I think when I'm talking to a patient for the first time and having to kind of navigate that language of the translation from stuff they've never heard before, from what's familiar and what I know as a practitioner now, it's the stories that help to relate, and the characters that we can find in the liver or the heart, or the way that their chi moves, that really resonates with people. And I think it helps to integrate and supply answers that maybe they hadn't gotten before. They've come to me at a frustrated level of either nothing's been working or I'm not being heard. And when they share their story, it's like, oh, well, that makes sense because of A, B, or C. And you explain as to why that might happen. And it almost like, it creates like these tingles of resonation or knowing.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that the tingles, and like when I'm having that discussion with people, and you can see that sort of like that intrigue of understanding, almost what you'd imagine somebody does when they're sitting around a campfire and somebody's telling a good story. They get that lean. They kind of lean forward, right? They're leaning forward like you're telling them a story about like some deeper truth of themselves. And in reality, like for myself, I'm just telling a story about, not even telling a story, just describing the spiritual characteristic surrounding lungs. Like somebody comes in with chronic cough or a skin condition, and part of it is like telling a story in Chinese medicine, doing that translation of language. In Chinese medicine, the lungs
have a lot of things going on, and they relate to the spirit called the Po. And the Po has a lot to do with, and you kind of start to talk about, man, the way that people engage with the sort of more philosophical and spiritual language in Chinese medicine. Now, I'm sure you get this too, and I'd be curious to hear. I certainly have clients that if I were to say something like the Po is the spirit of the lung, they'd be like, yeah, okay, toodles. Off I go. Like, yeah. You get that too?
I have had a few of those, but it's interesting because the more because I mean, really now, even though I've been graduated since 2019, because of pandemic, like now is actually when my business is actually moving and flowing the way I want it to. And it's the more I stay, what's the good word? The more I stay in my power, in my seat, in what I want to do, I attract the clients who speak the same language, or at least are curious about the same language that I have. That yes, I get one or two that come in and be like, don't even talk to me about why you've got a candle lit on the table. But I'm just here for my knee and because it hurts. But more and more, I think people are becoming more open to it, more curious about it. I find for me, if I present it in a really comfortable way, if I'm nervous about what I'm going to say to them, I think that's also going to play back. So the more I'm comfortable in my woo-woo and my everything that I've got going on in this room, the more open they are to it as well.
Yeah, I mean, that takes a lot of courage, right? Like you're a relatively new practitioner, but you've been doing it for sort of a medium amount of time, I would say. Yeah. And a lot of practitioners that I know in this sort of era of their career, it's still very much I'm just going to do what I got to do to get people in the door. So the courage that you have to more lean into the type of person, key first and foremost, the type of person you are, and also the type of practitioner you are. Like that takes will, that takes courage. That's so good for you for doing that.
Thanks for saying that. That's nice to hear. Because it definitely, I remember starting my business and going and having somebody who's been in business, not necessarily in acupuncture, but in other places for, their whole life. And they say, you have to know your clientele. I'm like, well, my clientele's everybody. I want to help everybody. But that was the learning curve in the beginning. It was one, I can't help everybody. It's not personal if I can't. Totally. And if I don't want to burn out, I need to work with those who work with me.
Right.
Yeah.
So who's your ideal client? Like if you were to paint, like, I don't know if you've done those business courses where it's like, make your avatar, your perfect, yeah. Like who is your perfect client?
I still have trouble with that because there's still in my mind, I want to help everybody. But the ones who inspire me the most, I kind of have two age ranges. I would love to work with like 17 to 23-year-old females and just juice them up with so much potential and just, teach them that it's there. Because I feel they sit in front of me and I can see it and I vibrate it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I just want to shake you and let you know and fill you up. But it's that stepping and teaching of like, here are tools you can use to navigate this world. Here's a safe space that you can be whoever you are. And I'm going to encourage you to be that. And even those, I encourage them to go out and tell their friends, like claim your space, claim your sovereignty or whatever it needs to be. So that's one group I really am passionate about, especially with the world they're having to grow up in. I just want to know that they can create whatever they want. They're not stuck with what is right now. The other side would be premenopausal, postmenopausal women, because they are very curious for something different. I'm finding.
Curious for something different. That I would agree with and resonate with.
I think of my mom when she declared her 50s as her decade of her. So I put kind of that same that same group of women in that sense of like, if you think about going through your maidenhood, motherhood, and crone, that is that time to return back to yourself now with all the wisdom of your life. And so if I can be there to help again, like show the women all this potential they still have in the rest of their life, because it's quite narrated, I think, in our world that everything goes downhill after a certain point, but I don't think that's true.
Yeah, that's super interesting. What I find so interesting about it is like you bookended the demographic I love to spend my time with. You know, like I'm like if you're middle aged, if you're and you got like all of this, you're like in the middle of manifesting your potential. And I also really like working with people who are like, all right, I had buckets of potential and I've messed up a whole bunch, but I'm hitting the like, yeah, that middle demographic of people who are just in the thick of it. I like working with them.
And see, that's what's so amazing about having so many different practitioners, because it lands that there is a right somebody for everybody. And I mean, I'm not going to, of course, turn any people away in that middle demographic, but I just, it's that I feel like there's in that middle demographic sometimes, and I think maybe because I'm experiencing it at the age I'm at, that life is almost too full to take on a lot of new things.
Totally.
And I really love that I find in Chinese medicine that the role of healer is teacher. And that's where I really love to sit too, is to teach the new tools, to encourage people to use them, and going on from there.
Yeah, I can dig that big time. I mean, of course, a big part of my career has been teaching practitioners. And when I'd be working with my clients, I'd be teaching them as well. And I would use this excuse like, oh, it's because I teach and I'm just kind of in teacher mode. But I've also come to realize the same thing you have. And I really appreciate you putting it the way you did that in Chinese medicine. And I think in any form of complete healing system, the role of the practitioner is as teacher. It's like we'll do what we can do to get your body roughly into the territory where it can start to heal, but we also need to teach people how to participate in their healing.
Exactly. And I think that's probably one of my like staple explanations when I have a patient in for the first time of, we are a team in here. I'm not letting you get away with coming in here, me doing all the work and you leaving. I assign homework to my patients when they leave for the week, and I check in with them when they come back. And it's nothing big. I know life is busy, but it's the things that help to, I think, integrate and inspire the continued healing when we do have our time apart, because it's so easy to go home, get into old habits, and go from there.
Yeah, I kind of played around with this different idea for a while when it came to home care, because I'm the same way. I give homework. I don't say everybody, because sometimes there's just like, there's not much to give as far as homework. Yeah. People are like doing all the things. I love those clients. They're already doing all the things. They're just coming to you for that little cherry on top. And you're like, all right, I'll send them to you. Anyways, I digress on that. But for the people I do give homework to, I've kind of bounced as far as best ways to do so. And there's a lot of tools we can use in the treatment room to help set proper goals and create motivation, right? And there's things we can do in the interim between when we see them. But what are some things that you do to really help encourage your clients to participate in their own well-being? There's the talk you give them, we're a team in this. But what else do you do to help them do their thing?
I think ultimately I like it to come down to play, because we work so much as is, that if there's something playful that you can integrate in with it, it makes it a little easier. So some examples that come to mind, one client shared with me that one of her happiest times was laying in a field and looking up at the sky. So I made that her homework for the week. No matter the weather, no matter what it is, please go find a field and know that when you're laying in it, you're supporting your earth element in your body, which we're working on. You're inspiring and supporting your lungs because you're out in the fresh air. You're inspiring your shen because you're connecting to that place that made you so joyful. So it's Yeah, that's one example. Another one is just intuitively came to mind. It's like, I need you to go home and lay in a red blanket. And, so it doesn't have to be, I guess, hard. Playfulness is what I try and strive to.
And it also sounds like your homework is still speaking to that deep self, right? Like lying down with a red blanket. That's obviously speaking to some part of the inner experience, as opposed to like, I need you to go do 25 push-ups, right?
Right.
How do you find that facilitates then the overall, or actually a different question, I think more important question is, how do your clients respond when you give them this homework? It's like, do you want me to lie in a red bouquet? You're like, how do they respond?
A little bit like that. They're like, oh, okay. But I think because it's out of the norm and it's almost disguised. Yeah, there's a certain disguise to it that doesn't seem like it's anything too hard to do or life-changing. But when they return, they're like, that was actually really nice. I could probably do that again. I'm like, well, please do. I'd love for you to do that again. And it creates a little bit of light in their eyes, in themselves, that they're proud that they took that self-care moment, even though it was just, play.
I like it. There's something to it. It's novel too, right? Like people like novelty. You tell them to do something they've already tried to do or they think they know how to do. Like, oh, I know that doing my stretches is supposed to help, right? So they got this, I know. So maybe part of the efficacy of this is like that, okay, I guess I'll do that. It's so novel, it's so new, they don't understand why. That's cool. I really like that approach.
I think my favorite one to assign is before they get off the table, I said, I know there's a song you love to sing in the car. Your homework is to sing it on the way home, like as loud as you can, like move your lung chi, spark your heart, just, those sorts of things.
All right, so let's role play here. I'm a client, right? I'm coming into you for the first time, and we can actually do Jess and do it, but no, just like you got a client coming to see you. What's that process like?
Well, it usually starts with, oh my gosh, that was the longest intake form I've ever filled out from people. And I'll get around to that. A little bit of backtrack. Over the past 2.5 years, I've been experiencing a lot of work in the somatic experience area. And that has really integrated into my practice in terms of setting up a space where people can land. And it's very important that I, in that space, am neutral for when they arrive, because I know how much energy plays into that. So when a person arrives for the first time, it helps that I'm in this beautiful stonemason house in the middle of the woods. So that already kind of sets the mood. And when they arrive, I greet them outside. We talk about, how sunny or beautiful it is. And, or if it's not, I live in Nova Scotia, it's raining all the time, but just kind of a general comfort landing. And when they come in, this is something I learned from my somatic, is the words welcome here. And I find when I hear it from when I see that practitioner, it tethers my body to here. I'm not thinking of what was before, what's coming after. It's like, welcome here. I was like, oh yeah, I'm here. Like, thanks for calling my attention here. And we sit down and I say, then we get into the intake form and I say, like, this is Nancy Drew hour. We're going to talk, we're going to learn. I'm going to share stories. We're going to just get to know each other and make sure that we're comfortable in this environment. And that is really my favorite time, because it's the opportunity to teach. It's the opportunity to learn. It's my time to just see their potential, which everybody has so much of. And it's just so cool to see and discover in people all the time. Yeah.
I think actually I want to go down that road, because I've been keeping mental track now.
That's the third time you've mentioned potential, and every single time you kind of spark a little bit when you say that. So, like, what is it? What is it about potential that, I mean, there's the obvious things about potential that's exciting. It's like the thrill of the unknown things. But like, what about potential has you so gripped at this stage in your life?
I mean, strangely, the first word that just came to mind is permission. I feel like we don't in society have permission to be our truest selves because we keep editing to fit into places that feel comfortable, or are forced to edit ourselves in order to stay safe in a place. And I just think there'd be something so magical about the earth if we were all just running around as our soul selves. And I feel like I can see that in people when they sit in front of me. And it's a little bit of my sense of like, I want to get to it quickly, but I'm learning in myself that I have to slow down to their pace and do the whispers and take the journey with them and go along the way. I so hope for everybody that in their lifetime they feel comfortable enough to be their truest selves. And that to me, I guess, is the potential. It's the Tao, it's the path, it's the returning to, the original Shen you are in the womb when you are made of cosmic fire and divine light. Like we have that capacity. So let's get to it.
So then, I mean, I like it. And when I come to see you, or a client comes to see you, and how do you facilitate manifesting their potential?
Before, I guess, towards the end of going through their intake form and learning about them, I asked them what that is for them.
Oh.
I say that's kind of my ending question before we move into needles and that time. I said, if I can, without any limitations, if I could wave my magic acupuncture wand, what can I do for you? What can I support you in here? And everybody takes pause and gives really beautiful answers. I mean, yes, there's, say, for example, someone's come in with knee pain. By the time we're done the intake, their goal is no longer knee pain. It's all of these new possibilities I've offered them through our discussion of like, oh yeah, you're not sleeping well, you have not a lot of motivation. Like they're like, oh, I didn't know those were things that acupuncture could also support. And so I want more energy to do these big things. I want inspirations. Like when it comes to this offering no limitations and what is their goal, it becomes huge. It's not just body pain anymore.
I've found something quite similar to, not in all of my clients, but in a number of them, when we really go through the inquiry of motivation, like figuring out why somebody has come to see you, it's very rare that conversation ends with knee pain, in my experience. Right. We can leave it there. And again, sometimes I do. Like sometimes you get that vibe from a client and it's like, you're here for knee pain, and you just get that vibe. They're like, listen, I'm here for knee pain. They look at you in the eyes. It's like, just drop whatever you're going to do. You get those. But I find, similar to you, the very vast majority of the time you get into the motivation. And it's, I have knee pain that I want gone so I can do this thing. Well, why do you want to do this thing? Because it makes me feel this way. Great. Why do you want to feel that way? Because I think ultimately doing the things helps them feel more in alignment with that true self, right?
Yeah. That purpose,
so
that potential.
Cool.
Yeah.
I had a conversation just yesterday with a good friend of mine about potential. And it was a fascinating conversation because he's going through a bit of a rough time in life right now. And the guy's got, like, as we all do, abundance of potential. Like we all do, but can we manifest it? Can we bring it out into the world? And what I find interesting is, as you were describing sort of your tact in moving with people, kind of in this earthy, watery sort of way of
helping to facilitate that. Yesterday was the exact opposite with this friend of mine. And typically I would be very similar with my clients, right? But I looked at him in the eye at some point in time and I'm like, enough. That's enough. Do the things, period. No more conversation. And it was like a shift from this nurturing sort of motherly form of healing and caring to the more paternal masculine form of healing and caring,
which both are so needed.
Mm.
And I think it's, again, like going back to, that's why we need different practitioners in our lives to help facilitate those changes and those flows for what's needed at the time. I just happen to be a hard earth practitioner.
Yes.
And I mean, I use the word hard loosely there.
You mean hard earth, not like yeah, not like hard as in like hitting your head on a rock is hard, but like it's a hard stop. I'm like fully in 100% earth. Yeah. Yeah, it's rare you encounter an individual who is as thoroughly one element, I think.
Right.
Yeah, so good for you in that. Embrace it. I love it.
Yeah. There's a book by a herbalist named Susan Weed, Healing Wise, and she talks about the different healing traditions, and one of them is the wise woman way of healing, and that is specifically like nurture, digest, integrate, nurture. I'm like, yes, Susan Weed, you speak my language. I'm not here to be a heroic or anything like that. It's like, I just come into this room so that I can love you.
Yeah, it's so important, right? And I think going back to this common theme we've been having about how important it is for there to be so many different types of practitioners. It's like as a client, there are times in my life when I need to go to like a coach, like that masculine, more metal energy. Maybe I don't mesh well with woods for some reason. I don't know why, but but you go to like those more metal or wood type coaches. It's like, do it. Like it's time. That the treatment is kind of it's rough and it's quick. Like there are times when I really need that. But then there's certainly times where it's just like, all I want is just, I just want a little bit of love. That's it. I just want to rest, and I want to be surrounded by this blanket of attention and caring, right? So that's what I want. And I think this is encouraging for practitioners, because the fact is, no, I don't believe a client has a practitioner. I think ideally a client has a team of practitioners that they go to for specific needs to be met. So the niche that a practitioner finds themselves in, niche it, like go for it, because there's plenty of people with plenty of needs.
Exactly. And I've felt, even since the beginning, and maybe even while I was in school, I never felt a sense of competition when it came to acupuncturists in my area, because it's a relatively small area, but there are quite a few of us, and even more graduating every year. But there's not a sense of competition. I think, one, because as long as the client is on the way to their happiness, their health, their balance, it doesn't matter whether it's coming from me or somebody else. But the fact that, there's variety. And if you look outside your window into nature, there's variety. Yeah. So why, the cookie cutter doesn't not work in this integrative medicine.
No. And it's like too, when you get to the end of your relationship with a client, you've seen them 2 or 3 times and there's nothing wrong in the interaction. You felt a good vibe. But oftentimes when clients leave, it's not necessarily because they didn't like you as a practitioner or you didn't fix them. It's just they got what you needed. They got what they needed from you. And that might have only taken 1 session. That might have taken 5, right? So that transition of clients coming and going, of course, we all want those long-term see you for life clients. But the reality is a lot of people enter our sphere for relatively short periods. And that's okay too. It's just like seasons coming and going, right?
Yeah. And that, I would say, that would be like my biggest advice to anybody new to it, is that it's not personal. Like it is just that it's the season passing through, or it's just not the right vibe. It's okay. There's 8 billion people in the world. The right people will come and will thrive from whatever you have to give.
Can we talk a bit more about your healing experience over the last couple of years? Kind of coming at it more from the perspective now as you're the client, because you talked about you've been seeing a somatic experiencing practitioner for quite some time. You said, what, 2 years now?
Yeah, probably coming on 3. Yeah.
Coming on 3 years. That's a long time to be committed to seeing an SE practitioner. And it has it been the same practitioner?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. Would you mind telling me a little bit about that experience? Well, maybe start at the beginning. What got you interested in seeing a somatic experiencing practitioner?
Purely curiosity.
Okay.
She actually came, so I work in a multi-practice building, and she had come to see the room that I'm currently practicing in. And that's how we first initially met. And we became friends first. And then she told me a little bit about what she does. And I said, oh, well, curiosity for curiosity's sake, let's try it out. And I can't always explain what happens in that room, but it is mountain moving, like stuff. So we initially started with no goals in mind, just kind of casual exploration. And the first thing I initially got from those was an extremely empowered feeling, in terms of like, she just kind of taught me that, and maybe it's just gave me permission to go into a room, feel my body, and go, where would the chair best sit to make me comfortable? And I have permission to move it there. Because, when people come into my room, I don't have much option moving my 300-pound mechanical table around for their head to sit just right in the space that they'd like. So even just my awareness that that's a possibility that our nervous system is taking in all the time. And then that stretched to, taking a drink of water to nourish my body. It was not just a sip of water. It's like, I'm taking that for me because I deserve it and because I want it. So it was confidence building, I guess, in the sense of getting to know myself on those levels. And then, of course, as we progressed on, there was deeper and deeper levels to get into. Like, I will share this morning, I had a somatic session that really kicked my butt. I've been crying on and off all day because it was just this new layer that I found of myself. Like, wow, that was brutal. And I say that jokingly as well, because I'm observing how jovial I can be in this moment versus how I was this morning. And I love that flow to the day, and how you can step in and out of things when you need to, and how intelligent the body is to do that, to compartmentalize that from this morning. And this practitioner and I often laugh because I'm a Scorpio, and transformation, like, if I'm not transforming on something, what am I doing in life? Like, it gets stagnant really quickly. I want that deep darkness. I almost kind of like take pleasure in the pain of it all, of that healing process. And so in our session this morning, I could feel in my body the Scorpio portion and what I called the jazzy version. I just had this like slow drum beat in my head of like the slow ticking kind of and like, okay, more of me wants to be slow today than it wants to be fast and transformative. The fact that I can recognize that in my body is something completely new to me in the first 3 years. Yeah.
I think that's beautiful. And while there's a countless amazing things that come from somatic experiencing, my opinion is that that's the foundation of it, right? That's my experience with the SE training that the SE experiencing I've done. Gone to many practitioners. I took the first year of training as well, and Brianne is actually going into her second year of it. And like, I think that's one of the things that I appreciate most about it, is how you have to use thought. So it doesn't discount the power of thought, because it's the cognition, the choice of taking your point of awareness and placing it exclusively in the body. And like, when you do that, you start to notice like your body is constantly sending you information, like nonstop. It's sending you data. And the data, I mean, my because metal, certainly logical, right? Like the data that gets put into the body, the body's communicating is like safe, not safe.
Yeah.
Every time, always, that's what it's telling you. This is safe, this is not safe. And it's like a billion times per second. But being able to tune into that and really hone in, it's like, okay, I'm getting a not safe signal from this, but why?
Yeah.
Why, like everything's fine, everything looks okay, but you get that not safe, and you kind of peel back a layer, and little by little, you peel enough of those layers that you start to feel more safe. And I think part of the reason that that's so important is it goes back to a conversation we were having earlier. It's like when facilitating somebody's authenticity, that true self, it's so hard to do if there's not this felt sense of safety. So training people and teaching individuals and oneself, certainly, how to use the body. I use the analogy of a compass, like how to use the body as a compass that points you to safety, because being in that environment of safety allows us to touch authenticity without fear, right? Like what a cool practice. And what I think I like a lot about it too is that's TCM has been talking about that for eons, just in its own crazy TCM lingo. Have you ever read The Tao of Trauma by Elaine Duncan?
I am about, I don't know, quarter of the way through it right now.
Okay,
Yeah. It's funny. I have a colleague who's an avid book reader, and I'm a little bit of a squirrel when it comes to books. I've got all the ones I've ordered because they look so good, but never started.
Yeah.
So we started a little book club. So she keeps me accountable for reading. So yes, that's one we're exploring now. And I have pages circled so far of like, oh my gosh, this SE, somatic experience. And I actually am about to start the training in May for the first year. I'm so excited.
Super cool.
Yeah. Because
I've already noticed go ahead. You.
Already what I've learned through my experience, I've been able to integrate into my practice. And like, because I don't have the training and maybe even the capacity at this point to know how to land somebody back from something super, super big, what it can do even just on the kind of surface level is quite incredible.
Yeah.
And most of it to me, again, kind of goes back to my like love of play, that we just play around with the imagination and see what shows up. Like one of my most favorite plays was a gentleman came in for smoking cessation protocol, pretty straightforward with the ear protocol. But while the needles were in, we would play around with these energies and these ideas. So I asked him to visualize what a craving looks like if we were to give it a body of some sort. And at first he's like, I don't really know what you're talking about. I'm like, well, imagine if a sugar craving was like that round ghost in Casper that ate food and it all just fell through him. Like that would be a sugar craving. And so he came up with this, his body came up with this beautiful image of a smoke figure that was like a James Dean leaned up against the wall. And we spent the next half an hour kind of having a conversation with James Dean, the smoky James Dean, as to like why smoking was present in his life and what it filled for him. Because it was in the play that we learned that when we asked, how do I quit smoking? James Dean would start to fade away. And well, it makes sense that a craving wouldn't want to tell you how to quit him. So why don't we ask, what is he serving? What part of you is he comforting? Is he serving? And those sorts of things. And the answers that came out of that were profound. We're like, wow. Yeah. And so then we could support those parts in other ways instead of with the smoke. Yeah.
What I find fascinating about a lot of these practices like SE, and it does come back to languages. When I was in my second year of acupuncture school, for a bunch of reasons, I decided it would be a really good idea to learn how to become a hypnotherapist. So I'm dual programming. I'm doing acupuncture and hypnotherapy simultaneously. Do not recommend, by the way, FYI.
I can imagine.
Don't even talk about the job, and no, just Like, hey, Jess, let's tax stress. I digress. So I take my hypnotherapy training, and that was formative. Like, quite frankly, second year of acupuncture school, it wasn't that challenging for me. For whatever reason, I didn't find it that much of a challenge. So it wasn't a big deal. But hypnotherapy, like I was like obsessed with this practice of hypnotherapy and studying. And I took course after course and program after program. And by the time I finished my 4-year TCMD degree, I had taken like almost as many hours of hypnotherapy training. So it was ingrained in me, the way we speak and all these different techniques. And then SE started to pop up, and I'm listening to SE practitioners, and I'm like, oh no, that's hypnotherapy. That's not SE. Like that's so it's so fascinating that we're getting to this time where all of these different modalities are sort of, I feel like we're kind of cutting away the excess of modalities. Like with hypnotherapy, the idea is you've got this excessively long deepener and trance states and blah blah blah. Whereas you don't really need that. You can just start having a conversation with smoke based who is it?
James Dean.
James Dean, right?
Yeah.
And again, it does come down to language. And I've noticed that in our interactions as well, that even though you haven't taken the SE training, you talk like an SE practitioner. In other words, the landing and in a lot of invitational language, and what a difference that makes. I mean, I'll tell one more story because I feel like I'm rambling a bit here, but so Brienne was doing her training, and she's more kind of naturally able to do the SE stuff, right? And we were doing a yoga teacher training together. We were doing an anatomy training for yoga teachers. And she's like, okay, so we're going to spend the first 20 minutes and we're going to do a landing. And I'm like, no, we're not. We don't need to land. We're going to teach anatomy. Nobody needs to land anywhere. Just learn the shit, you know? Like, she's like, no, we're going to do a landing. And I'm like, we don't have time. But she won, as usual. We do a landing. Like 45 minutes later in a yoga, people are crying and everybody's like hugging, and there's like this sense of like unity. And I'm like, fine, your stupid landing is worth it. But what I mean to say with this is like this invitational language, the verbiage and the dialogues that surround SE, even if one doesn't get into the training, simply learning how to use the words is so powerful. One of the best ones Brienne taught me is that makes sense. Like just saying to somebody, like, you know what, that makes sense. You're not saying it's right or it's wrong. It's just like, that makes sense. Like, I think that's such a valuable thing.
Yeah. And it's so funny because I'm so hyper aware of it, and maybe just because I've come out of session today, but even you saying that makes sense, like it feels in my body like the back of my ribs were just supported. It's like, oh, somebody's got my back with that sentence. It's like words matter to an incredible amount. And I think we get a little lazy with our words. And even prior to SE, I liked, when I'm having really big, deep conversations, I like to, and I'll share this with the person I'm having the conversation with, I need a pause so I can find the right words, because I don't want whatever's about to be said to be lost in whatever dribble comes out. And it's so funny because I have a very fiery friend who told me once that my pauses drive her crazy. And it makes sense when you think of fire, because if I leave a big open space, fire is going to fill that up with all of the things in their head that it could possibly be. They'll round off 40 different thoughts in the time that it takes me to get my perfect sentence in line. And so that would drive that a little crazy. So yeah. That's just a little side note on how,
I mean, that's one of the 4 agreements. You know, one of my favorite books, be precise with your language, be precise with your words, right? I think it's one of the 4 agreements. Yeah, it is. And I'm actually curious, and the reason I want to ask this question is I had a former student of mine, and Mike, if you're listening, hey, where he asked me this question just the other day about communication, because he's a brand new practitioner, right? And there's such a huge part of our job is spent talking and discussing and listening to people with stress and anxiety. And it seems like the moral of this particular conversation is language. We've circled back to it a lot.
Mhm.
And we've talked a lot about the spoken language, the words that we use, how we choose to say those words. But of course, as we know, spoken verbal language only accounts for, I think it's like 7%. The internet will prove me wrong on this, but
Yeah.
it's a staggeringly low percentage of our communication is based around our words, right?
Right.
So can you tell me, outside of words, what other language do you speak in a treatment room that helps your clients get into this space of safety?
I think it's most important that my nervous system and who I am for today is settled for when they arrive. That's my first language energetically. Being being the holder of boundaries energetically, I think, is another way. And sometimes I communicate those to who are, that to those who are open to it. So, for example, in my practice, so I've been training in various practices in shamanism for a few years now. And so there's certain things in my room that help set that energetic boundary. Or I start my day with the practice of calling in the directions, calling in support to help hold the room as I need it. It's funny, I've had a lot of questions, but there's stickers in my room on the wall that mark true north, south, east, and west. And that's my marker. And it's just because generally north, south, east, and west tend to fall naturally in corners of rooms or middles of walls. But this room is just 15 degrees off. So, but I kind of like it for that oddity.
It just puts you're not a metal.
It puts me in this kind of like, this is almost a bit of a fairy realm. We're just kind of slightly out of the ordinary. Whoa. And so I've got, a blue dot, which I can see in front of me now. That's the west. And those reminders set the space. It is, I use my words to do so, but I do walk patients through landing when they arrive. We have our discussion, we have our kind of our human time, our regular chit chat, check in with them. But when they transition to getting onto the table, there's steps that I walk through. It's taking a breath, and it varies, occasionally in which direction we take, but it's always landing with the senses, feeling their body on the table. My voice drops into this lower, quiet, easy space. We check in with their sight. We check in with their ears. Music as a language is huge in my space. Sometimes the medicine is me DJing what songs play while they're on the table, because I know, like, this will be the one. This will be the one. And so that arrival, and then I help walk them through setting boundaries of time. So that visual step of leaving everything that's come before and to come after. And I personally, mine are bookends, but everybody's imagination is able to be, so that I can help them grow this present time, the time dedicated to themselves and their healing that I'm here to support. And it just is like this whole, like, we step into that almost non-ordinary world where there are no limitations, where the magic can happen, where we are 15 degrees off of north, south, east, and west.
I love it. Yeah. I think that there's something to the slowing down, the playing with time that really helps people. My treatment room, it has no windows. There's no clock that clients can see. And it's just once people go in there, it's like this little bubble of warmth and like slow down. Yeah. So I think that's an important thing to communicate non-verbally, is like we're in a time vortex here.
Exactly. And I think that's so important for the nervous system, that nothing is happening deeply healing if you're in fight or flight. And I think we live a lot of our life in fight or flight to some level.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, that we need rest and digest for everything to fully integrate. Yeah, to be earth, to be integrated, to be nurtured. Yeah. Yeah.
So let's pretend now that that I'm a new practitioner, right? And just generic, just totally generic. I would like to hear your advice to a new practitioner of like, and try and keep it to one thing. This is a hard question, but like, what's the one thing that a new practitioner or any practitioner can do to be more successful? What do you think that is?
Oh, like 1,000 things just piled to the front of my brain to say. Let me pick with my heart. Maybe that's the better way to do it. Never stop learning, I think would be,
That's complacency.
To keep the spark alive, never stop learning. Because we have thousands of years to access from. The pot is never ending.
No.
And especially if you don't put the limitations on what some, a point can do or your words can do, or be curious and never stop learning.
I can dig that for sure.
Yeah. And I don't think it has to be big. It doesn't have to be, hundreds of dollars in courses every year. It can be a book. It can be keeping track of observations. It can be, learning yourself, I think, is the best way to learn the medicine. Yeah.
The way that I interpret the words never stop learning, because it's a relatively common phrase, right?
Yeah.
Is foster curiosity. I'm not sure if it's the same thing for you, but that's kind of how I've learned to interpret this idea of never stop learning, because
such a juicy way to say it. I love that. Yeah.
Because it opens up so many more doors. It's like, I'm curious about this pain in my foot. I'm curious about why trees grow that way. I'm curious about how to better serve my clients, right? And then that just kind of opens it up a bit.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe a side note of find a business course, because that's often missed in school, but but that is so not in the magic. That is so ordinary life. Yeah.
It's funny because I'm actually right in the middle of making this business course for RMTs, acupuncturists. And it's like, so it's this free course. I like to do one free course a year, right?
Yeah.
And usually my free courses are like 1 or 2 hours. This damn thing is like turning out to be like 6 hours. It's basically a little mini MBA in business.
Right.
And now I'm regretting committing to doing it for free because, it's so much work. But what's interesting about it is I'm really enjoying it. It turns out when you approach business with that same curiosity, it's like, you want to help more people. You want to, well, it turns out you have to know business to do it. So if you're curious about building your business so you can help more, again, that sense of like, how do I do this? How do I create an environment in our business where I have the ability to help more? That's been super, super awesome for me. Like even bookkeeping, which you think is super boring for most people, probably is, but there is, I think, a way to approach it. It's like, if I do this better, I can help people better. Yeah, I don't know.
I'm not quite as excited as you, but I love that you are.
Okay, great.
We need people like you to be excited. Yes. I remember, and I mean, I've come up to it a little less, but there was, I'm going to say at least 24 times I said to my dad over the past 3 years, I don't want to be a businesswoman. I just want to be an acupuncturist.
Totally,
So yeah, I don't want to do paperwork. I want to show up, light my smoke for the day, settle into my space and put on the music and just go. And
that's beautiful. That's beautiful because it's the same thing we've talked about. There's different types of practitioners. There are the ones who are like, I actually want to start a business and I want to grow a clinic. And I want that clinic to be based around health and wellness. And then there's the people who are like, I just want to show up into your clinic and do my thing. Right. And if those two types of energies can meet and have an agreement, because so often the clinic owner does things and runs a clinic that isn't in alignment with the practitioner. And so often the practitioner doesn't do the things required in order to run the clinic, so it's like this. But with proper communication, language, talking, then those two can match. And that's, I think, where the magic happens again.
Exactly, because we need all of those elemental factors. That's where balance comes from. And and I mean, I think it's valuable for a new practitioner to know every business is going to look vastly different, and it's okay.
Yeah.
Because getting out of school, I had a classmate of mine, social media savvy. Oh my God, it looked good. It was building her clients. She was coming up really quick, had waiting lists for new clients. And I was like, what is happening? Like, what am I missing here? And she was so kind to kind of give me instruction and what works for her. And then I come back to the South Shore of Nova Scotia, where word of mouth is everything.
Totally.
Not even a Facebook post. Don't even talk to me about Instagram on the South Shore. Like, it doesn't exist here. And so I get referrals from friends of friends of friends who have heard about me through their friend, their experience. And that's how my business grew. And of course, word of mouth moves slower than social media, but it's what works in this space. And that'll be different. In a city versus a town versus a township or anything like that. Yeah.
I think we've circled a few pretty important topics. It's interesting because I mean, that's a definite theme. Language that we're using, how we communicate, and the fact that you got to be you. You got to be authentic. You got to be the practitioner that you are, and however you identify that. Maybe it's through SE, maybe it's through tuning with the body, but just be you, and you'll attract the right clients, right? And I think this is a good place to wrap things up. Yeah. Absolutely. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we call it a conversation?
The only thing that comes to mind is play. Have fun.
I think that's fun. Great thing. Just play.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you again. I really, really appreciate this conversation. I got to say, the last one was good, but this one's even better. So,
and I knew it was going to be too.
Yeah. It all happens for a reason, as everybody says, right?
Yeah. So, well, thanks so much, Jess. I really appreciate it. And listening to your podcast so far has been really, really great. You're doing, I'm excited for all of this.
Sweet. Thanks.
Thanks.